So what do you do when they stop building your favourite car? If you're Jim Ratcliffe, the billionaire chemical magnate who owns Ineos Group, you start building it yourself, which is exactly what we have here. It's called the Grenadier, and it's essentially the 2.6-ton fallout from Ratcliffe and Jaguar Land Rover's differing views on what the future of the Defender should look like. Back in 2016, when production of the original Defender ended, Land Rover wanted its iconic off-roader to evolve into something more haute automotive, which is why the all-new Defender is built on the same platform as the Range Rover and is a relatively luxurious and pricey proposition. Ratcliffe, however, wanted the more simplistic, rugged Defender template to continue, and when it became apparent that wasn't going to happen by Land Rover's own hand, he hatched a plan to build such a car himself. 6 years and 1 or 2 court cases later, the newly formed Ineos Automotive now operates out of an ex-Mercedes factory in France, and prototypes like this one are racking up the miles ahead of the Grenadier's official launch later this year. It'll cost from around 48 grand for the commercial 2-seater, though a 5-seater commercial will also be available, as will a full station wagon variant. Plus, there's a pickup in the works. So what have we got here? We're in an old quarry here in the Saarland. It is incredibly muddy. It's proper Defender terrain, or indeed Ineos Grenadier terrain. So the construction is typical hardcore off-roader. It's a ladder chassis, body on top, body on frame. It's got beam axles at both ends from Carrero, who spent most of their time making agricultural machinery. It's got electronic diffs in each axle and then another center diff, which you can actually control manually. In terms of powertrain, Ineos has got a deal with BMW. The result is 2 engines that actually really suit this car. So we've got the 6-cylinder petrol here. It's a B58. It's essentially what you're going to get in faster 3 Series, 4 Series models, even the Supra. Yeah, this car, this reborn Defender-style car has got the same engine as a Toyota Supra, but you know, that's the car world in the modern era. So the petrol's putting out around 280 horsepower and 330 pound-foot. It's not in the same state of tune as when it arrives from BMW. Ineos actually flattened the torque curves, and the diesel version, the Diesel 6, is a really potent, torquey motor. But yeah, beneath us, transmission tunnel, we've got an 8-speed ZF box, and it's mated to a Tremec transfer case. Obviously, you've got high range, low range, you can lock the center diff. In terms of the interior, the idea with this was pure functionality, so actually it feels a little bit like a flight deck in here. There is a lot of physical switchgear, and that's because, you know, if it's wet and you're wearing gloves, touchscreens really aren't much good. And it's kind of refreshing to have all the switchgear. We've got all the off-road stuff up here on the ceiling, including just a dedicated off-road button, which kills all the, the driver aids, the lane keeping, everything, and a wading mode, which essentially keeps the engine warm enough when it's wading. It's not exactly the most surprising thing to discover that it feels, quite Defender in terms of the driving position and the vantage point, but you have got somewhere to put your elbow at least, and that's an improvement in my book. The seats, they are custom from Recaro, actually really supportive. Again, they're designed for proper off-roading, the support you need doing that, but actually you'd be pretty comfortable in these on a long journey, and it's a pretty accommodating cabin actually. One of the more incongruous elements of this car is actually the BMW gear lever in the middle. It's the only giveaway that something's been borrowed, because everything else is custom Ineos manufacture. The dashboard, I think, is actually 3D printed and then obviously carefully inserted and bolted into the car. As for the statistics, nothing is yet set in stone, but the preliminary figures are competitive, with breakover, approach and departure angles aligned with those claimed for the Jeep Wrangler and the Defender 110. Wading depth is 800mm, which the Defender beats, but only by 100mm and with the help of its height-adjustable air suspension. This example is still in the prototype stage. Ineos is still just fine-tuning and calibrating the factory in Hambach, so this one's covered in stickers, and although you probably can't see it, the center console is not representative of what it's eventually going to be like, but the outside is pretty spot on. There's quite a lot of optional gear on this one. The big skid plates, front and rear, are standard issue. This car's also got the rock sliders, so Jeep Wrangler style. You can properly use those to pivot yourselves over rocks in boulder fields. It's not just mud that this thing's designed to handle. It's got a reinforced roof that can take payload of up to 150 kilos. And obviously the ties you need to secure stuff. The real acid test, I guess, is somewhat conversely when we drive it on the road, because you know it was always going to be brilliant off-road, and so it's proved. I mean, this is some really challenging terrain here, and it's just hoovering it up. But again, you know, it's exactly what you'd expect. But it does feel coherent. I mean, the capability of the thing is undeniable. Now clearly a quick prototype drive like this one needs to be taken with a pinch of salt. The Grenadier makes really short work of this old quarry, but in truth it still feels like the e-diffs and traction control could be working a little bit more effectively on the mud. And that's probably something that Ineos will try to finesse in the final stages of prototype development. On the whole though, it's pretty impressive, and arguably of equal importance to that, pretty likeable too. If they can also make it work well on the road, the Grenadier ought to be a successful addition to the serious off-roader ranks.